you've ever wondered about that Zillow Zestimate on your home, I'm here to give you the whole truth and behind the scenes thoughts on what's going on with Zillow. Hi there, I'm Riley Smith, president of the Riley Smith Group, and I have been a realtor here in Miami for almost 25 years. And one of the things that drives me crazy is how homeowners and potential buyers rely so heavily on Zillow. Today, we're going to unpack a lot of things about Zillow and get down to the real truth about how the estimates work and how they could impact pricing or offers here in the Miami market. So listen, I get the appeal of Zillow. It's like sitting there having a cup of coffee and checking your stocks or checking the value of your house. It's quick, it's easy, and it gives you a general valuation. But what I'm really here to tell you is that it's not always accurate, everybody. So we need to really unpack what is going on with that estimate. So especially here in the Miami market, which is one of the most complex markets in the country, the Zillow estimate is really inaccurate a lot of the time. So there's so much to navigate here, and that's what we're going to dive into in the rest of this video. Before we dive in, make sure you subscribe to this channel if you want more real talk about the real estate market here in Miami. If you find anything I'm about to say helpful, please drop me a comment and also let me know what you think of your estimate, good or bad, thumbs up or thumbs down. So I think when we dive into thinking and talking about Zillow, we should really start with a very basic question. What is a Zestimate? A Zestimate is an algorithm written by Zillow to help come with an approximate value of your home. It is not an absolute value, and in certain markets, the variance is unbelievable. It can be right by 10 to 15,000, or it can be off by hundreds of thousands. And that's the challenge that we have when we're using Zillow as a basis for how much a home is worth and potentially how much equity you may have in your home. So some people think there's probably a person behind there reviewing it. Absolutely the furthest thing from the truth. Right now, all that happens in Zillow is computer generated and now surely AI enhanced thoughts about what your house is worth. What they do is take into consideration a wide variety of factors. It's not just the home to your left or the home to your right that recently sold. They're looking at all kinds of different things to come up with this algorithm that helps them come up with a Zestimate. It's pretty easy to understand what data they're using. They're using public recorded records and they're using MLS data. So they do know what homes have sold and how much they sold for. A lot of it is based on price per square foot. And that's about as far as they can go. And really, when you're thinking about valuating your home, there's so much more to it, especially here in Miami. Let's start with what street are you in? What neighborhood are you in? What is the condition of the interior of the house? How big is your lot? Which way does the lot face? Is your street busy? These are just some of the factors that Zillow has no idea how to calculate and is absolutely missing the mark on your estimate. So in a market like ours, the problem is Zillow never opens the front door. They never come in the house. They never see the renovations the homeowner have done, good or bad. So they don't really have a basis of what the house looks like now compared to when the previous people purchased it, and any work or renovations or remodeling, or even if you added new structure on the property. So this is a big problem because they can't open the door and peek inside. And that's really where you need the help of a true real estate professional that has been into most of the comparable homes in your area. And that is a huge thing that we take into consideration when we come up with your home value. So listen, the Zillow algorithm is not always wrong, and it's not for everybody. The Zillow algorithm works really great in a lot of parts of the United States and even here in South Florida, especially when you have planned communities where the homes are fairly similar, the lot sizes are fairly similar, and the comparables are very similar. But in Miami, as you guys know, we have a little bit of everything. We have $100 million properties and $200,000 apartments all within blocks of each other. We have different sized homes that are on different streets. Some are on the water, some are in a gate, and some are on a golf course. Zillow doesn't care about you being on the water or being in a gate or being in a golf course, and they don't really know the impact that that has. So it is really hard for them because of so many variables that we have in South Florida. They get it right a lot in a lot of parts of the United States, don't get me wrong. But down here, I find it particularly challenging for them. So certainly, even in Miami, two homes on the same street can be wildly different. You can have a big new modern build with a cute little cottage right to the side of it. And those valuations will be completely different based on a variety of different things. Maybe it's the more land on one side or the newness of the other. The question I get asked a lot is about how does Zillow handle situations like our properties on the water and different waterways and different kinds of water. And what I'm seeing, especially in Coral Gables, which has a lot more water than Coconut Grove, South Miami, or Pinecrest, is that Zillow has a hard time figuring out what the canal is about, how big a boat can you have there, what are your views on the water, are you in a gated community that adds value onto the water. These are sort of the anomalies in our market that make it so hard for Zillow to really dial in the exact right price for your home. So the condo market, sometimes it's easier for Zillow and sometimes it's harder for Zillow. In a condo, most of the lines are exactly the same. So if you're looking at an O1 line or an O2 line or an A line or a B line, Zillow can easily understand that the neighbor above you or the neighbor below you sold for a certain price. They assume that your unit will look fairly similar, and it's actually pretty easy for them to get those right. Where they really go wrong is that they can't see or understand all of the different things outside the apartment, especially the view. They don't value what the view looks like, or whether there's a building coming up right in front of you, or you're looking at the back of an alley, or you have that amazing sunrise looking out over South Beach. None of those things can be taken into consideration by Zillow. And as we know in the condo market, there is a million different views and a million different things that can go right or wrong with those views. Something that we've seen lately with Zillow is this new impact that we've had on HOAs fees, insurances, and how condo associations are really handling themselves. If you have a local realtor who has boots on the ground and understands the dynamic of these small market condos in small areas in Miami, then they can help you figure that out. But what Zillow doesn't understand is if the association is a mess, or if the bank can't get a loan because they have too many tenants in the building, or if there's an assessment coming, this may make your unit wildly different in price, or even sometimes unsellable. And again, Zillow doesn't know any of the dynamics what are happening behind the scenes in the condo building and with the condo association and boards. So these are some things that you definitely have to be careful with when you just go, oh, Zillow says my condo is worth X. There are a lot of wild Zestimate stories out there. The wildest story ever, and this has been rumored for a long time, is that when Zillow's president back in the day put his house on the market, Zillow got it wrong by millions of dollars. Can you imagine that? So that's kind of a funny thing, probably a little egg on Zillow's face. But I think here in Miami, I have seen some really wild Zestimates. I've seen stuff that Zillow said was $1 million sell for $3 million. And I've seen the opposite where they say it's $3 million and it's like 1.2. So there's some really wild stories out there about Zillow. If you guys have any of those stories, I'd love to hear them. The bane of my existence is Zillow because primarily we are a listing agent company. And when we're going on listings, the first question the owner asks is, well, what about Zillow? Zillow says X. So we always look at Zillow when we go to a listing appointment and we always want to take it into consideration. But really that for me is a huge hurdle that we have to overcome with. The sellers sometimes just hang their hat on that Zillow number. They've been watching it go up and down for months or years before they call us. And they truly, truly believe that it is completely accurate. So it does take quite a bit of time to walk them off that, show them reasons why, and sometimes they're pleasantly surprised, but quite often Zillow errs on the side of a little bit too high, and the seller's expectations are now falsely set, and we have to slowly walk them back to reality. In Miami, there's 65,000 realtors. Some are better than others, and I have seen some wild things out there. But when I see a Zillow Zestimate that matches the list price before it goes on the market, I'm just wondering, did the realtor or the owner just take the Zestimate and put it on the market? This can be really dangerous. If you haven't done your homework, whether it's too high or too low, the seller could be improperly positioned in the market, or the seller could be leaving money on the table. So whatever you do, make sure you verify that Zillow number. Once upon a time, Zillow decided they were going to get in the home buying business, and they were using their own estimates to figure out valuations. And this caused all kinds of problems that we didn't see for years down the road. It was also a really bad time for them. They really didn't time the market properly. As it turned out, that was an entirely disastrous phase in Zillow. They put that behind them now. They're certainly moving forward. And don't get me wrong, this is not a hate on all things Zillow. This is more of a cautionary tale to be careful what you think of that Zestimate. It's interesting now that they put the home buying stuff behind them. They seem to be focusing on just making sure they get that algorithm properly and redoing it every time so they can get closer and closer to the right value. When they were buying all these homes, it was coming out that they were not properly pricing it, whether they were buying or selling them. It kind of gave all of us in the real estate community a little bit of a chuckle, right? We'd all kind of like to see Zillow, sort of the big bad brother of real estate, have a little egg on their face. I particularly love talking with buyers and Zillow estimates because we like to talk about the Zestimate before we walk in the house. And then usually when we leave, we like to say, hey, what do you think? And that's where you get to really understand what looking at a house is from the eyes of a buyer. When a buyer opens the front door, they're looking at curb appeal. They're looking at vegetation and landscaping. These are things that Zillow does not take any into consideration. So before you even walk in the door, the valuation could be wrong. Then once you're in, the buyer is looking at floors. They're looking at quality of upgrades. They're looking at the appliances. They're certainly looking at the floor plan and making sure that's functional. They may be opening the drawers and looking at the AC closets to see how old they are. So there is just a myriad of things inside the apartment or the house that Zillow would have no way of knowing. And this is the importance of making sure you get in the house and spend some time, open up all the drawers, open up all the closets, and look under every corner. And so you really understand what you're seeing inside the house and not relying on what Zillow thinks. Lately here in South Florida, and certainly particularly in Coconut Grove, Coral Gables, and the surrounding areas here, there's been a new thing that has come into the valuation model, and that is walkability, walkability, walkability. As we get all these people coming into town from Chicago, New York, LA, and all the big cities around Miami, they are looking for walkability and they are adding that to their valuation score on the properties. Zillow doesn't really do a good job of understanding, are you 2 blocks away from the Starbucks or the cute little cafe? Can you get to the park with your kids? Or can you get to the gym in a matter of minutes? None of these things get into the Zillow algorithm. And so therefore, that is a new problem that Zillow is going to have to figure out. There's kind of a myth and an unknown out there about Zillow. Do they really understand the dynamics of the inventory in a given market and then understand what that impact has on the value, right? Of course, if there is lots of home for sale in a small area, there's going to be a negative impact in value as buyers have options. And if there's not a lot of homes for sale, then sellers are going to be forced to pay maybe more than they want or even more than real value to get into the neighborhood. And I don't really know for sure if Zillow has that dialed in. So if you're watching this and thinking about selling, certainly looking at Zillow and Realtor and all of the other websites out there is not a bad move before you call a professional. It can help you have an understanding of which way the market is trending. And usually you can see if your house is going up or going down. But I think after that, that is about the extent of how you should be using Zillow. From that moment on, you need to call a professional. Hopefully it's one of us here at the Riley Smith Group, but get somebody in there that really understands your local community, your street, your neighborhood, or your building for that matter, and that can really, really help you navigate all the things that we've talked about today that makes it so challenging for Zillow to give you an accurate Zestimate. Quite often we get asked all the time, what is the difference between a Zestimate and a real CMA? Again, the Zestimate is only being done by the computer. They're taking an algorithm that Zillow has, they're pulling a lot of data points and bringing it together. But when you get a CMA from a real estate professional, they're taking the time to make sure that each comparable they use is a comparable for your property. Zillow has to take all the comparables in the surrounding area and try to figure out how to change those values to give you an accurate value. But when you get a proper CMA, we're not going to compare a 2-bedroom house with a 5-bedroom house. We're not going to compare a house that's worth $5 million and worth $1 million. And we don't have to do any playing around with the numbers to come up with the right answer for the seller. We just simply look at what is the best comparables in the area that most likely match the description of the house. And then we work from there. So we have a distinct advantage that Zillow does not have. They have to take the entire market and try to fit it into one number. We get to eliminate 99% of it and hold on the exact right comparables for your property. So I think quite often Zestimates cost sellers money. I think there are a lot of sellers out there that get stuck on their Zestimate, and sometimes the Zestimate can be a little behind, it can be a little bit too high or a little too aggressive, and they don't place the house on the market at the right price because of it. And then if the market gets away from them, we start chasing the market down. The Zestimate will eventually come back down again, and the sellers will start to realize that, but there is a lag time that happens there. So those Zestimates are not as real-time data as you would think. I think that is where Zestimates can cost the home seller money. And if they have a too low of a Zestimate on there, potential buyers are looking at the Zestimate and saying, if the Zestimate is this, why am I paying that? Or why are they asking that? So it does cause some confusion in the marketplace. And I think that's our job to help navigate. In my opinion, down here in South Florida especially, the Zestimates generally overpriced slightly. That's just my opinion. There's a lot of data points. And again, there are thousands and thousands of properties, and I don't go in and see all of those. But the ones that we generally look at for the most part, especially in the higher end neighborhoods, I feel like the Zestimates can be a little ambitious. The question I get asked a lot is, do you as realtors look at Zillow? And the answer is, of course we look at Zillow because it gives us an insight into what our clients are thinking, whether it's the buyer or the seller. But of course, this is the easy access point they have to home valuation. They don't want to run the comparables and do their own CMAs. They rely on us for that. So we always look at Zillow, but we don't ever trust Zillow. But it is one of the first things that we look at when someone wants to have a conversation about buying or selling, so we can understand the mindset that they may already have. I think one thing where we see Zillow come into play a lot is if I'm representing a buyer and the Zillow estimate is a lot lower than what the house is being offered for. This is where it gets a little tricky. Quite often the buyer's like, well, Zillow says it's this, and they're asking that, and why is the difference? And that's where we have to spend a lot of time, like I said, looking at the comparables and helping them understand that. But I do think that sometimes a low estimate on a property can be a problem. Now, Zillow has kind of fixed that, because lately what I've noticed is pretty much when you put your house on the market, Zillow is going to bring their Zestimate pretty close to that. And that gets a little tricky for buyers now, because more and more I'm seeing Zillow adjust their pricing to current asking price. Maybe they assume the realtor and the homeowner are getting it right more often. But are they really getting it right more often? You could have a very aspirational seller that sets a price, and then Zillow is adding something to their Zestimate to get closer to that price. But that may not be the actual price. And if you're a buyer and you're looking at that, it may be hard to understand the dynamics that are going on there. So what's the big takeaway from this? Think of Zillow as a tool, but not absolutely the truth. In a city like Miami and in certain neighborhoods inside of Miami, the dynamics in our communities are so challenging for Zillow. That's where it makes it really hard. So if you live in a community where every house looks different, every street has different characteristics, right? Or whether you have gated communities and waterfront properties all mixed together, which is so many of our South Florida communities, that's where you have to know that Zillow is going to have some challenges. So what you really need is inside local knowledge. Make sure your realtor, whoever your advisor is really comfortable in your area, in your neighborhood, and can really articulate to you, buyer or seller, all of the nuances that are going on in that neighborhood. Like we at the Riley Smith Group, who spend all of our time passionately studying the market, wherever you are in Miami, we can absolutely help you. If you're curious about Zillow and if that's really accurate or what the true home value is for your house, please feel free to reach out to us at the Riley Smith Group. Drop us a message, give us a call. We're happy to send one of our professionals over there to talk with you and make sure that we look at the comparables with you, free of charge, absolutely no pressure. We want to make sure every homeowner and every buyer is absolutely well equipped to make the proper decisions. Have you ever had a wild Zestimate story? Too high, too low, dramatic swings? We would love to hear from you. If you found this video helpful, give me a like, drop me a comment, or just subscribe. We would love to help you. And as always, we'll catch you on the next one.